Hi, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Board on March 7th, 2023. This meeting is now called to order. I'll request that staff call the roll for members who are present and who are not.
Sure. Board Member Alexin?
Present.
Board Member Kent?
Present.
Board Member Summers has an excused absence. Vice Chair Kowalski also has an excused absence. Chair Reggie?
Present.
And Board Member Blaney?
Present.
Okay, so next we'll move right on to the meeting procedures. Would like to ask staff to address how public comment will be working this evening.
Sure. So in addition to accepting written comments up to the DRB meeting, staff is accepting public comments in person at City Hall or over telephone or through the Zoom meeting. Members of the public are invited to participate via conference call at the following number, which is 669-444-9171. And the meeting ID is 831-0781-8748. If you're participating by telephone and wish to provide comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period for the item you'd like to speak on. This virtually raises your hand. Or if you're participating via Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. Once it's your turn, you'll hear a notification that the host is inviting you to participate. At that time, please press *6 to unmute yourself. If you can then speak, introduce yourself, and you'll be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak. And if you submitted comments prior to the meeting by email or letter, it has been forwarded to the Design Review Board.
Thanks. Now I'm going to describe the meeting procedures. We will begin with the staff report for each item, followed by the applicant's presentation. Members of the public will then be invited to speak. Community members on the conference call can speak when they receive the notification that they have been unmuted. Comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes each. The board will then have an opportunity to ask questions of staff or the public after each segment, and then we'll close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the board for discussion. So at this time, anyone with an urgent communication on a topic that is not on the agenda may address the board at this time. Please know that anything raised has not been noticed or agendized, so there will be no discussion on these items at this time.
And so again, to comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And again, this is for items not on the agenda.
Anyone on the call?
Nope, I'm not seeing any hands on the Zoom.
Okay. So we'll now move on to the consent calendar, which has one item, the minutes from the December 6th, 2022 Design Review Board meeting. Are there any comments from the public on this item from the consent calendar?
So again, to comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, please press *9. Once your notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. This is for the minutes of the last meeting. And seeing none.
Okay. Is the board prepared to make a motion? I want to remind you to say your name before making the motion as well.
Member Kent moves to approve the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Member Alexin seconds.
Okay. I think we're ready for a vote.
Okay, Member Alexin?
Aye.
Member Kent?
Aye.
Chair Reggie?
Aye.
And Member Blaney?
Aye.
And that is passed. So now we'll move on to the action items on the agenda tonight. The first one is 76 Albert Park Lane, Wildcare, and we'll now hear the staff report.
Sure. So I don't have a very formal presentation. What I'll do is I'll give a brief overview of the project. This is a proposed major redevelopment of the existing Wildcare facilities. Wildcare is a wildlife hospital, nature education center, and wildlife advocacy organization. And the proposal includes relocating and restoring the historic Terwilliger building, demolishing all their existing structures on the site, and constructing a new 3-story attached animal hospital and office building, along with a new courtyard for gathering spaces. So this project requires a major environmental design review permit, which requires Planning Commission approval and Design Review Board recommendation. At our last meeting in December 6th, this project came before you as conceptual design review. At that meeting, two members raised some concerns regarding, I believe it was the west elevation in terms of making improvements. But my understanding was the rest of the board felt that they could recommend the project as proposed. So for that reason, it's up to you if you would like the applicant to provide a presentation. They're prepared to do so if you'd like so, but also if you feel that there's no need, given that we've had conceptual design review, I leave that up to you all.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for staff before we address that? Okay. Thoughts on the applicant doing a presentation?
I wouldn't mind asking a couple questions of the applicant.
Okay. Yeah, I had one question for staff, which was, is there a materials review board or materials board? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then it sounds like we would like to see the presentation.
Oh, wait, sorry, let me turn on your.
Thank you. Just, would you like to ask questions or do you want us to present them something first? Not sure how to focus the presentation.
Yeah, I think a brief presentation and then we'll go to questions for you
Okay.
guys.
I think one thing, if you can just tell us if there's anything different from,
Yeah, let me just start with that and then we can decide if we want to bring some visuals up. So since we last saw you, and you'll see that in your packet, we included the civil drawings. 'Cause we made, a whole lot more progress on really making sure that we had the ground plane figured out. In the course of looking at that, we adjusted some of the fencing, particularly on the south side. And we made sure that you could exit the site both from the Albert Park side and the Mariposa side accessibly. So we made sure there was an accessible route and ramped down a walkway around the building and out the back. We also had the transformer underground previously, and we're planning to move the power pole. We reconfigured the back end of the site so that we could bring the transformer back above ground and above the floodplain. And we deleted the diesel generator on the project and we'll be going with battery backup. And with all that, we no longer needed to move the existing power pole in the back. I think besides that, those were kind of the major shifts. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much as you've seen it. When we met with the neighbor in the back, one of the things we did is we generated a couple other views so that they could see the property from their viewpoint outside the fence line and kind of what that Mariposa view looks like. And, that seemed to allay all of their concerns.
Does the board have questions for the applicant? Jeff?
so it looks like you're capturing all your water on site and piping it out to Mariposa. Is that correct?
Yeah, I
It
think,
looked like
think
that from the
Mariposa is
civil.
the
and
direction, yeah.
So you don't have any bioretention on site?
Oh,
at all?
yeah, no, we're holding, treating, and nothing else is running off. We're holding and treating all the water on
Okay.
site.
So those areas will have plants, right?
Yes.
But you don't have a landscape plan at all, correct?
We don't have a landscape plan. We have very little landscaping, but we did provide a plant list for the kinds of plants that we would propose in those retention areas.
Okay. And then last time you were here, I'd asked if you could explore maybe doing a little more edge landscaping. Was that looked at all?
I was just gonna say.
I
the
know there's not a
landscape-
lot of space there.
There's
I
not a
get
lot of
that.
space. And so in the front area, I think it's changed perhaps a little bit and we've defined where the bioretention, there's one actually in the front of the site towards the creek.
Okay.
And then the other bioretention is actually around the animal caging sort of, it's actually a buffer between the animals and the people in the courtyard. So, I mean, we're doing sort of as much as we can in
Right,
terms of
I
landscape on
understand
the
you
front.
got quite a big program you got to try to meet there. So does your creek plan, does it have to be passed by like the Department of Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife or anybody?
Yeah, right now, our biologist has advised that it'll have to go through the Bay Area Regional Quality Control, Water Quality Control Board. She does not think it will require Army Corps of Engineers approval if we basically followed all of their advice and we've stuck to really just the bridge replacement. But, as the project moves forward, we would meet with all of those agencies and make sure that we understand sort of that path to approval.
Okay, yeah, I figured it had to be somebody. My last question is kind of for the city. I mean, you're cleaning up your frontage and you're getting rid of the invasive plants. But is there any way the city can get a volunteer crew in there and maybe get some of the invasive further up from them out?
I could certainly look into that for you. I think that'd be more in the realm of sort of public works,
Right.
given this
But
public.
it'd be nice to see a little bit of a coordinated effort because obviously the invasives are just going to move right back in.
Yeah.
If
Yeah, no,
something else isn't done.
I can definitely look into that and follow up with you.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. That's it for me.
Any other questions from the board? Done? Nope. Okay, I would like to see the materials board. Would you mind? Could check that out. Has anything changed in the material palette? Okay.
Would be all right.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So now we're going to open up the public hearing. I want to remind everybody that you have 3 minutes to speak, so please keep it to that. We will be timing.
And right, so to go over the instructions again, to comment on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature. If by phone, please press *9. Once you hear the notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Or if you're in the public and you wish to speak, please come up to the microphone. Let me see if there. And I'm not seeing anybody on Zoom.
Okay, so then we're going to close the public hearing. And I'm going to bring it back to the board to discuss and see if they have any comments. Michael?
No, I mean, I think it looks
You have to
phenomenal.
turn on your mic.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
No, I think it looks phenomenal. And like we commented last time, I mean, you did an amazing job with what you had to work with in the site. It's pretty impressive. And I do like the material selection. So really no comments to help.
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, like I said last time, I'm pretty impressed that you actually were able to solve this riddle at all. I think it's a pretty amazing project for what you had to deal with, and I can support it as submitted.
And I guess I was ready to approve the project at the last meeting, so I'm sorry that we held you over for another 2 months.
Okay. So then I guess in summarizing the feedback, Jeff, you had one action from Jeff to look at if there's a way to include some invasive cleanup in a larger area of the creek, but otherwise, I want to ask the board if you have want to make a motion.
I move that we recommend the approval of this project as submitted.
Can you say your name?
Remember Kent said that? Sorry.
Okay, and your name?
Blaney,
Okay, then I think we're ready for a roll call for vote.
Okay, Member Alexin,
Aye.
Member Kent,
Aye.
Chair Reggie,
Aye.
and Member Blaney.
aye.
Okay, and it is approved. Thank you. Okay, and now we're gonna, oh, yeah, I think we're good. Thank you. It's beautiful. Okay, and now we're ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, 1515 4th Street, a new mixed-use building, and we'll ask for the staff report to start.
Absolutely. I'll just pull up my presentation here. Slideshow. Okay, so this project before you tonight is a new mixed-use building at 1515 4th Street. The requested entitlement is a major environmental design review permit, which requires planning commission approval with a recommendation from the design review board. So the project site is surrounded by Shaver Street, 4th Street, and E Street, as well as 2 commercial buildings to the south. Currently, there's a vacant. bank building on the project site that would be demolished. And the site is approximately 38,500 square feet. In terms of a project summary, so the project would include 162 residential units and roughly 8,900 square feet of ground floor retail space. The northern face of the proposed building that faces 4th Street is 7 stories, and the southwestern corner is 8 stories. 119 of the residential units would have 1 bedroom, and the remaining 43 residential units would have 2 bedrooms. The project would include, of those units, 13 of them would be affordable, below market rate units for very low income households. Level P2, so the lower 2 floors, there's level P2 and level P1. They consist of 179 vehicle parking spaces. There's also a bicycle storage room for 116 bicycle spaces, as well as a trash room. For the ground level, it includes retail space, a gallery space, reception area, club rooms, 9 residential units, and a courtyard with a swimming pool area. And levels 2 through 7 would include the remaining 153 residential units. And I'm going through this relatively quickly. The applicant will be providing a presentation from their perspective as well. And then for the level 7, the top floor would also include a lounge room and 2 roof decks you see here at the top right, and that's the southwest corner of the building. In terms of architectural details, so the exterior walls would include stucco in light tan color as well as in light umber color. Balconies would be made out of glass and the windows would be aluminum with gray trim. The proposed building includes articulation in 3 areas. So 1 being building recesses and projections, also 2 being variation in color and 3 being variation in materials. So for instance, the front northern elevation appears to have 5 vertical columns in that light tan color, while the rest of the building is recessed back in the light umber color. The top level, level 7, is also slightly recessed from those columns in a light umber color to distinct the top level from the rest of the building. And then also the ground level is primarily glass and storefront, so to differentiate that level from the rest of the building. Balconies project from the face of the building on 3 sides of the building. And then finally, the proposed windows are recessed from the face of the building. And I'll quickly go through the elevation. So here's the north elevation facing 4th Street. Here's the east elevation facing E Street. And the west elevation facing Shaver Street. And that's where you see the 2 driveway openings. So the one on the left goes into level P2 and the one on the right goes into level P1. And then here's the south elevation. And here's a section just to give you a sense for how those essentially below level garage floors are working. And then with the ground floor retail. In terms of landscaping, so their proposed street trees, they're all on the city's approved street tree list. They include scarlet sentinel red maple, crepe myrtle, Chinese pistache, crimson spire oak. There's proposed plants in the streetscape planning areas as well as in the building perimeter planters. And those plants include things like dwarf bottlebrush, rock rose, dwarf grevillea, and there's also a creeping fig on the west side of the building that's actually the intent is for actually grow up on the stucco for where those 2 levels for the garage levels are. And they are proposing 4 steel benches in the public right-of-way along 4th Street. And so see, if you can see my cursor here, there's one sort of corner bench right here and another corner bench over here in an area that's actually outside of the sidewalk to give a place for people to sit. as well as another bench on this corner and another bench on the other corner over here. And then finally, also, would provide 8 tubular bicycle racks all along in the 4th Street right away. So I think front and center for this project, I want to give some background on how state density bonus law applies to it. So state density bonus law basically allows for a project that provides a minimum percentage of affordable units to seek waivers and concessions to development standards, as well as to getting increased density beyond what the city would typically allow. So this project's in the downtown precise plan, and all of the properties in the downtown precise plan do not have a maximum residential density. And so the way you apply this law to such properties is first the applicant has to propose what's called a base density project. So this is a hypothetical project that complies with all of the development standards. So we're talking maximum height, minimum setbacks, building step backs, all of those things. And this hypothetical base density project has to have basically the same average unit size as the actual proposed project. And how it works is the applicant is, through doing that process, has shown that they can do a base density project of 122 residential units. And they're providing 10% of those units as very low income. And so pursuant to state density bonus law, they are now allowed to get a 32.5% density bonus increase. And so if you apply that number to 122, that gets you up to 162 units. So they're allowed up to 162 residential units, which is what their proposal is. And in addition to that, they are allowed to seek basically as many waivers as they want and up to 2 concessions. And basically what the difference between a waiver and concession, a waiver is any development standard that precludes the construction of those 162 units. And then a concession is just simply a reduction in any site development standard or modification to zoning or architectural design requirements. So I know this legislation is very complex. There's a lot to it. So feel free to ask any questions, but I did want to try to give a little bit of an in-depth background on it. This site, the large majority of the site is isn't inside the T4MS 50-70 district. So our downtown precise plan has really long names for our districts. The MS stands for Main Street. The 50, the main thing you need to know about the 50-70 is the 50 just basically means a maximum base height of 50 feet. And then there's just a very small portion of the site on the southeast corner that's in the T4N 4050 district. And so the project's seeking a concession for the requirement to provide 1,000 square feet of civic open space. And then they're also seeking waivers for these items shown on the table here. So maximum height, building step backs, and then also building setbacks in the T4N district for that small parcel. Another state legislation that I also want to point out that was described in the staff report is the Housing Accountability Act. And so the 2 main provisions out of this legislation I want to point out is basically that the design review board can only place conditions on a project that are based on adopted objective development standards. So namely, that's the massing and facade articulation standards described in the staff report, and I'll go over in the next slide. And then also the design review board is not allowed to place any conditions that would reduce the density or the lot coverage. So essentially, we can't make any comments that are actually going to reduce the actual size of the proposed building as part of this legislation. So the massing and facade articulation standards, these are in division 3.2 of the downtown form-based code. Just to summarize them, there's the tripartite facade articulation, basically meaning you need to have a distinct base, middle, and top. So that's why I was trying to describe how it has a distinct ground floor, middle floors, and upper floor. There's also the requirement that it has window bays and openings based on prevalent patterns of 5, 7, or 9 bays. Also, it needs to have a distinct corner elements, and then finally include projected or recessed window bays. So in conclusion, the project complies with all development standards through the state density bonus law. So staff seeks confirmation from the design review board that the project complies with applicable objective development standards, namely the massing and facade articulation. And if design review board agrees, staff asks the design review board to consider providing a recommendation to the planning commission.
Thanks. Does the board have any questions for staff?
I do. I've been trying to deal with all these new regulations too, and it's just a nightmare. But providing whatever waivers they had, they were allowed to increase the number of units by the 32 point something %, which took it from 122 to 160. I can't remember the numbers exactly.
Right.
But the plate of the building is only so large. Is that what has pushed the building up by adding all those units?
Exactly. That's why they're allowed to get a waiver from the maximum building height in order to accommodate those additional units, those additional 40 units.
And what you're saying is there's nothing that we can do to prevent that or even criticize the height of the structure.
That's correct. State density bonus laws is very clear that they're allowed to get that. And then in conjunction with Housing Accountability Act, there's just no comments or way that the city can require them to reduce the massing.
Do you have a question? Yeah.
So question for Jeff. How in this type of proposal with all the waivers is traffic consideration?
Right. So in terms of traffic, so that they are going through the process of having our Public Works Department review a traffic analysis. So that will come before Planning Commission at a future meeting, since that's not part of the purview of the Design Review Board.
I had one question. In your presentation, Jeff, you mentioned that the northern facade was 7 stories and the southwestern corner was 8 stories, but it says 9 stories on the, so I just wanted to get
Yeah.
clarification on that.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, the staff report was actually technically not entirely correct there. So the reason is because if you look at this elevation on the right side, it steps back. So the level 7 only goes so far. And so it basically does that essentially. So there's maybe a small portion that's in between 8 and 9 stories, but it's underground, if that makes sense, if this picture helps.
So measured from grade, it's 7 and 8 stories,
Right, right.
but it like drops below that average grade.
Right. Yeah, that's
Okay.
definitely part of this because there's existing retaining walls on the site that are keeping the site level. But as part of this, they're going to need to remove those retaining walls in that part to at least allow for the garages.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for staff? Okay. Would the project applicant like to make a presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Tom Monahan, and I'm representing Monahan Pacific, the applicant for the project. Thank you to the Design Review Board for your time this evening. It's nice to see you after many years. And thank you to staff also. Jeff's done a great job of getting the project before the DRB. I just wanted to keep my comments brief and just introduce the project kind of overview, and then I'll introduce the rest of the team for any questions or issues that you may have. First, I just wanted to mention the background of the project. So we've been developing projects here in San Rafael for over 25 years. We recently completed the 2nd and B Street housing project, which is a brick building on B Street in the corner of 2nd and B. We're currently building the AC Marriott Hotel on 5th and B. And we've gone to a lot of trouble to create a beautiful building here on 1515 4th Street. And so we've gone through many different iterations of the project. Some of those iterations are larger, believe it or not, than this project, which we have the right to do. But when we looked at those, we thought those were actually too large. There were 230 some odd units. And so we have been going through this process to try to find something that is financially viable and also fits within the community area. We like the West End. We think that's a great neighborhood. We're trying to find a balance between, a project that pencils and makes sense and great architecture. And we think we've accomplished that with this application. As you know, the downtown plan and the housing element has encouraged housing downtown. The city has a RHNA housing allocation of over 3,000 units that need to be created. And in the city's general plan and housing element, they've really encouraged housing downtown. And this is a unique site in that it's a larger site, goes from street to street. So we think this is a very unique opportunity to create the badly needed housing that both fulfills the general plan goals and the housing crisis that we're in. The state density bonus has allowed for, as staff has pointed out, height increases, which we need in order to make the project work. So we're proud of the project, and the project also includes 13 below market rate units that will rent to the very low income average household, which translates to about $1,500 to $1,600 a month in rental rate based on today's numbers. So we're very happy about that as well. I just wanted to point out one thing about the civic space. We're seeking a waiver from this 1,000 square foot civic space, but we're actually providing what we call a mid-block gallery in the design, which is an effort to have some gallery space that could be open to local artists that is almost like an airlock lobby where you can go into the gallery space, enjoy the art displays that are there, and then a second entrance that goes into the building itself. And so I'm sure our team will elaborate on that a little bit more. So we're trying to make a gesture to that civic space as well. So as I said, we're very proud of the project. We're hoping that the Design Review Board will join us in supporting the project and make a positive recommendation to the Planning Commission. I wanted to just introduce our project team who are here today to answer any questions. Isaiah Stackhouse is with the firm Trachtenberg and Associates based in Berkeley. They've got a vast portfolio of similar housing projects. And also Teresa Zaro with Yamasaki Landscaping Firm is here as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Isaiah and let him introduce the project. And we're available for any questions as you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Tom and Jeff. I'll try to keep it brief. They've done a great job already talking about the project. Nice to be here in person with all of you. It's my first hearing, I think, in person in 2 years, I think, and which led me to forget the material board back at the office, but thankfully it just got delivered. Okay, so yeah, I guess we can skip to the next slide. And next slide again. Let me see that. So the context view is a little hard to see on the screen there. So we'll just skip to the next slide. So here's the site plan, 4th Street here, E and Shaver. We'll talk about there's a sidewalk bulb out here, garage entrances over on Shaver. Next slide. Okay, so this is the double basement level. The grade is about 20 feet lower here, rises up quite sharply on Shaver. And then by the time you get to here, you're level in 2 floors up and a little more than 2 floors up here. So that we're entering this lower level at really the only spot on the site you can enter coming in. This is all standard parking spots. And next slide. And then as Shaver comes up, and we'll see this in the elevations as well, we can drive directly into the second level of the garage. These again are all standard spaces, includes a bike room, elevators, stairs, mechanical equipment at these levels. And then next slide, moving up to the ground floor. Here is the center of the project where we're having a bulb out, and also the gallery space that has sliding doors. We'll see in the elevations and renderings that can be made open to the public throughout the day. So on E and fourth is the predominantly where the retail is. Here it's very easy to get entrances level out to the sidewalk. The grade does start to drop down on 4th Street, moving this direction. And the interior here does end up quite a bit above grade at the at the corner here. Moving into the interior of the project, facing the rear, there are several units here, and then also units along Shaver. But at this point, they're really a full story above Shaver, and really 2 stories above Shaver by the corner here. And then these, along with the lobby and amenities rooms, look out to what we think will be a very nice outdoor courtyard amenity for the residents. And there are, actually, let's move up to the next slide. So this is the typical floor plans at levels 2 through 6, and a little hard to read at the scale, but there are, we sort of started the design with the precision plan in mind. And one of the things we did very early on was create units that have recessed balconies and sort of plan them in very key areas to break the facades into multiple pieces. And then and to add on to that, to add additional shadow play, the units that don't have recessed balconies, we added overhanging balconies that we think will create a lot of sculpture to the building as well. There is a central elevator here, core, where folks will come up and get a view from there. And then in general, we've placed 2s at the corners, a few 2s. The project is roughly 1/3 2s and 2/3 1-bedrooms. Next slide. And then moving up to the top floor, we have recessed all the units around the full perimeter, the 4 feet coming in line with the wall at the back of the balconies. And this we'll see in the elevations, creates a real top to the building and a strong cornice line. But we've held over the main entry lobby, we've held the same unit plans as down below to really accentuate the main building entrance, as it is predominantly a residential building. And then where the site drops off on Shaver and the building gets taller, we've held back a few units here. We pulled them out of the project, added a residential lobby or residential lounge here that opens up onto 2 different roof decks. And part of the reason for the roof decks is that the size of these roof decks works with the exiting at the end of the corridor. But then it also, we've run into this condition on other projects as well, and it turns out to work well in that it breaks up, it offers the building a chance where, for instance, people could reserve one of the roof decks and the other one could remain open to everyone else in the building. Okay, next slide. Here are unit plans. These are, generous light-filled units with plenty of room to really be furnished. We think they're very high-quality units that are suitable for, I think they're, just generous, very nice units. Next slide. Here is just won't really get into the detail here, but this is a sheet that the city reviewed to determine the base project and the density bonus. Again, this project, based on the drawings here, is electing to take only a 32.5% bonus. The state does allow a 50% bonus, but we, which would, even based on this design here, would be 183 units and a full story taller. But we, again, we looked at that and we backed it down to the proposed project. Next slide. So we won't go into a big level of detail here, but again, these are these next two slides sort of cover the sort of four categories in the precision plan. The first being the base, middle, top. So we talked about how we changed the unit plans across the whole top of the building to pull it back 4 feet and create a recess and a strong cornice line. The middle, we've tried to create a sort of elegant regular grid, and then at the ground floor where we have storefront and larger openings, create the base. And then again, we have placed these stacks of recessed balcony units here on all the facades to break up the building into 3 bays, 5 bays, and 9 bays to meet the objective standards. Next slide. This slide here shows the objective standards for corner elements. I won't go through all the details here, but it does require corner elements that are at least 1 story tall. In this case, we chose to make it most of the building, but the corner element, the building comes along and steps out at the corner, so we've taken that approach there, and the one other category is doing either recessed windows or bay windows. We opted, since we were already had a lot of articulation in the facade with all of the recessed balcony units and the extending balconies, we chose to recess the windows. So so that requires a 4-inch recess on all the windows, which we've done. Next slide. Let me see, building elevations again, along 4th Street here and along E. The ground is really up at the main floor, whereas the parking is down a couple of floors. Next slide. So here's again shaver that drops roughly 20 feet and allowing for the garage entrances. Next slide. Material palette, and we do have a material board here. We're proposing a product that we've used very often. It's called Eco Stucco, and it's actually a local company here in San Rafael. We've used it on lots of buildings. It really has a wonderful sort of rich patina to it. It is just a really, really great product that has held up well on buildings we have in place, and just has sort of a real richness of materiality. Next slide. So here's a view looking down 4th Street. Next slide. We'll just go through these quickly. Here's more of we've done each of these sort of in summer and in winter to show it with and without trees. So this is just the summer view. Next slide. Here's a view looking down E in the winter. Next slide. And here is summer with leaves. Next slide. Here's a view looking back east on 4th in wintertime. And next slide. And in summertime with trees. Next slide. Here's a view looking up Shaver, wintertime. Next slide. And summer. Next slide. And E Street looking north, winter and summer. And next slide. And then these are just some project renderings. And what we're trying to do is, create a high quality, carefully crafted building that will be well detailed, that will stand the test of time. Next slide. A nighttime view, again, with retail along Fourth. We're starting to see the project entry down here. Next slide. So this is the bulb out that's being proposed, and this is the gallery that's off of the main entry. This is being proposed with sliding glass windows here, so that the space can really be open to the street. Next slide. Here's a view looking head on at the again, the bulb out, the sort of the parklet. It's being proposed, sliding windows, gallery, and the main entry of the project. Next slide. Close up again of that with the sliding glass windows and the gallery space. Next slide. And here you can start to see 4th Street as it drops down here. It starts to get below the ground level, and as it turns a corner. Next slide. And won't go into details of landscape plan, but the landscape architect is here if there are any questions. There are new street trees and sidewalk improvements throughout, and then also well furnished open spaces on the roof decks and in the rear garden. Next slide. And that concludes our presentation, and we're here for questions.
I have one. With this number of units, I think the site amenities are really important to how the whole community is going to work. Can you walk us through some of those? Because there's areas where it just says like club room, and they just look like they're sort of unprogrammed spaces, and some areas have a lounge that are associated with outdoor spaces. So is it your feeling that the lounge, for example, might have some limited cooking facilities that would, facilitate, some kind of outdoor event, et cetera?
That is a great question. And I think it's something our team is still working through the details on. So we've, allocated square footage. We do know on this plan here up at the roof deck that we are intending to have sort of an indoor outdoor, where there will be indoor kitchen, tables and counters, furnishing, and then outdoor furnishing as well, with seating, tables, fire pits, that kind of thing. And then at the ground floor.
So just while we're on that space,
Yeah.
my drawing just has a bunch of little dark squares on it. What are those?
Oh,
They look like just
yeah.
squares on yours.
Yeah. So so this will be have planters and tables, couches, and again, so for instance, this outdoor space could be accessed at the end of the hallway,
Right.
or from the lounge.
So it looks like little square blobs on my drawing. Those are planters.
Those are planters and couches and tables.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, I actually had one question on that plan. Is the large light green square in the center also that rectangle? Is that a planter?
That is a planter. Yeah. So what we've found in the past is that the building and fire will insist that that these spaces be divided. It's simply too large to be one roof deck.
Mhm.
And so it has to be two fully separate roof decks. So we've done this a number of times where we'll have a planter here, which is a nice feature at the end of the corridor. So, walking down the corridor, you're getting natural light into the corridor, you're getting a view of the plants in the planter. And when you're here, you can't, there are truly two separate exits to each, each roof deck, truly has its own exit, that it's not one combined roof deck.
Okay.
We really felt like this was the right amount of roof deck space, and this was a way to make it technically feasible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had some other questions since I've started. If you go to the elevation on the west elevation where the two entries to the garage are, it looks like there's very large openings and there's sort of like a gray thing coming down in one of the openings. And my question is the intention for those to be, do you want the sheet number, Jeff?
Yeah, that'd be great.
A3.2. My question is the intention to fill that in because it's so high, especially on that lower level garage entry, or is it a giant door that comes down?
Yeah,
Yeah, that one, the upper one there.
yeah. And so there are garage entries here and here.
Mhm.
And then in the infill here, it's likely to have, again, we're in the design review, conceptual phase. So we haven't yet started the mechanical engineers to work on it, but it's quite likely that these may end up being some ventilation grills here, in which case we may grow vines up in front of them. But so just to be clear, there's a one-story entry here, and there's a one-story entry here, and a slightly off-tone stucco or possibly a grill up at this second floor level here.
Okay, so that's like a recessed panel.
Yeah,
and
so
then the door would
exactly,
go
a
below
recessed
that.
panel, yeah.
Okay. Okay. For the below market rate units, can you talk about where those are located in the project, if that's been determined?
Yeah, so they are identified in the plans, and they're spread out throughout the project, and they're also of a similar unit breakdown. So and that is listed in the plans as well. I don't remember offhand which ones there are, but they've
They're
been
sprinkled throughout.
they're sprinkled
not
throughout, and they've got a little
consolidated.
BMR in the plans on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the last of my questions. Does anybody else have questions? Go for it.
Hi.
Hi.
So could you talk a little bit more about the corner articulation? Because in the staff report, and you mentioned that it exists, but as you look at the actual sort of three-quarter view on the very first page, it looks like the corners are flush with the facade. So are you just talking about that whole sort of section of the building?
Yeah,
Sort of looks like it.
what we chose to do, and there's no objective standard that says, it must be between 12 feet and 14
Right.
feet, right? So what we chose to do for our corner feature is to create them with the 4-foot recesses here, and probably shows up slightly better maybe from from this view here. You can see as it turns the corner. So this is all recessed 4 feet here, back here, again, with the alternate color here and here. And so, we're choosing, again, the precision plan, as we understand it, gives some flexibility. The corner element can be 1 story, or it can be full height. It can extend up above beyond the roof. We chose, to make this our corner feature because we felt like it, fits in well with the overall design of the building, essentially.
I have one more question. You mentioned a materials board. Can we see
Yes.
that? Yes. Not yet. Yeah.
So one thing you can see with this eco stucco material, and it truly is a coincidence that it's from San Rafael, but you can see how much, it's nothing like paint. I mean, it's got real modeling to it.
Mhm.
And
Sorry, Isaac, all comments should really be going through the microphone.
Good point. Yeah, so if you look at the material closely, and it's a coincidence that it's a San Rafael product. We've been using it for many, many years, but it's sort of has a real natural look to it, almost like a Mediterranean kind of stucco that's got, there's just a lot of life and richness in the material itself.
And while we're talking about that, it mentions, let's see, how's it described? The windows are aluminum with gray trim. What
Ye-
does the gray trim mean? Is that bridging that 4-inch recess?
Yeah, so the gray trim, the windows themselves, will have some structural elements in them that will end up being painted metal trim.
The same color
The
as
same
on the
color,
board?
yeah.
Okay,
And so but what we find is we often end up with a fair bit of brake metal that gets painted to match the windows.
okay.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? None? Okay,
I was just gonna, hello? Hi. My name's Riley Hurd, part of the applicant team. I was just gonna close out with a little bit of a legal overview. Because we're in a bit of a new world order when it comes to planning here. So I thought, staff has done an excellent job in the report of kind of setting the table. But I live in San Rafael, I work downtown, and I specialize in the state density bonus law and the Housing Accountability Act. And as I'm going to these hearings, I think Board Member Blaney put it best. Confusing would be probably a generous term for the new state laws. So if you're not really living it day in and day out, it's tough to follow. But like Jeff said, we find ourselves in a situation where a design review board made up primarily of architects who's very traditionally used to giving pretty good subjective feedback is now constrained completely to the application of objective standards. And the government code defines those. So I thought it'd be helpful to hear the definition. And it is standards with no personal or subjective judgment, uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark available prior to submittal. So as these projects are starting to come before design review boards throughout the county, some of the board members are struggling with what their role is anymore, because when you listen to that definition, and staff is already charged with making it as part of the staff report, if it's truly an objective standard, there really shouldn't be any disagreement. So it's more like a confirmation. And, there's some frustration about this. And I think we may even hear some of it tonight. And the courts have said, don't come to us, vote for someone else if you don't like it. And the state has said, we need housing. San Rafael said, this is where to put it. That's why the downtown plan gave this one of the highest designations, the T4 MS 5070. Now, during that downtown plan process, it was decided that there would be no densities assigned. So that's why every time we do one of these projects, and you're about to see a lot more, just so you know, primarily around the downtown core, we're having to follow the process that Jeff outlined. We design a base project, and then you design the actual project. So in this case, we came up with 122 units as the base density. Here it was decided to only do a 32.5% bonus, but the state allows up to a 50% bonus. So that would have been 21 additional units had the applicant elected to proceed with that. But as the iterations kind of came forward, it was decided that this was the plan. Quick note about parking. I didn't hear a discussion about that just yet. There are 103 spaces required by the downtown precise plan code. Here we have elected to provide 179. So that's 76 extra parking spaces than is required by law. Also, ingress and egress, the topography of the site and the layout of the streets made it so that the only way you could park this project was with access off of Shaver. So I want to let you know that that was explored, but there's no other way to do it. And if you have questions about that later, the architect can get more into this. So as you know, this is the design review board. We're not here about traffic, drainage, things like that. We're here about design, but now the design is only based on objective standards. And, the waivers and concessions are state law issues. And so, we're struggling to see what to do at these particular hearings, but I'm open for any questions you may have about the law, because I've been studying this quite a bit. And thank you very much.
Does the board have any additional questions for the applicant?
I would like to ask one.
ahead.
So from your expertise, so the Housing Accountability Act would preclude us from commenting on the lack of any civic open space based on the density bonus concession, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it's important to maybe even hone down a bit more on the difference between waivers and concessions.
Mhm.
So waivers, there's an unlimited number of them, and they are for development standards that physically preclude the project from reaching the density to which it's entitled. That's not what's being used for the civic space, just to be clear for everyone. That is a concession. The concession is really relief from any standard that results in an actual cost savings. There's no more pro formas. You simply make the assertion, and the waiver is a much more lenient standard than, the concession is than the waiver, because it doesn't have the physical preclusion test. Despite that, you've heard they're proposing the gallery space, et cetera, but that doesn't meet the technical definition of civic space. So I guess to answer your question directly, you would have to find under the Housing Accountability Act that the standard for a concession is not met. And that's a very tough bar. So the only way a project now can be denied is if there are specific health and safety hazards, typically coming from a mapped zone, from verifiable, objective third-party sources. Obviously, that's going to be very tough to find in a downtown core area for a residential project. So, I mean, this is it. This is the new world order of planning. This is the state laws coming home to roost, and that's it.
Thank you. I had an additional question for the architect. For the EV charging spaces, are those noted in the parking garage, or where are those provided on the project?
Yes, I believe those are,
Are they the clean air spaces that are noted?
I'm forgetting offhand, actually, to be honest.
Are there EV spaces in the
There are
garage?
EV spaces,
Okay.
and I believe they are noted on the plan.
Okay.
I don't have a set in front of me, though.
It says clean air vehicle. Would those be the ones, or is that like a preferred parking space?
Do you recall, Jeff?
No, but I mean, I think the basic thing is that it's going to have to meet
Are required?
building code.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
I have one more question.
One more question.
Could you talk a little bit about your stormwater management plan?
Yeah, so there is a full civil in the set as well, but there will be flow-through planners towards the rear of the project. So what we typically do is work with the civil. It's typically a 4% ratio. So 4% of the water, 4% of the area of the roofs. There are planters typically down at the courtyard. So all the water hitting the roof will get collected into the roof drains. They'll all be run through the C3 planters. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but
Yeah, I am.
yeah.
So some of the planters we're seeing on the planter is actually bioretention, and it's not, conventional landscaping.
Yeah, and it'll be a mix, and that's typical of every project we've done probably over the last 15 plus years in the Bay Area, where typically every once in a while, we'll have a project that has actual ground level site area, but typically that happens on the podium level.
Okay.
There are people who try to do it up on the roof, but it's much tougher because you have to pump it up back into the
I mean, part of
planters.
the reason why I'm asking is Jeff gave us a little bit of a landscape palette there, but there was nothing there that would indicate it was bioretention type plantings. So maybe your landscape architect can present the drawings a little bit and talk a little bit about that.
Thanks for making that point. I believe the biofiltration plant palette is not on here because it hasn't been determined yet which of the planters would be flow through versus standard ornamental. So I can definitely add that palette in, taken from Bay Area, Bay Friendly stormwater LID lists.
Can you perhaps talk us through maybe A 2.1 and indicate what's bioretention and what's, traditional landscape?
So it would be some of the planters on the pool deck, the podium.
Well, there's only one. What, this little one here?
And I want to add, one of my team members just reminded me that the civils plans do also have mechanical treatment. And we could put the civil on if that's helpful to talk about it. So we often do, the C3, but in this case, civil has opted to do mechanical treatment as well.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I mean, I
we
think
can
any
certainly
trick.
have the civil is on the Zoom call. We could bring them up if that's helpful.
No, I mean, I think any trick you have to reduce, the landscaping becoming bioretention is good. Obviously, there's
It's probably
isn't any
better
opportunities here for
landscape.
permeable paving.
Yeah, the landscape probably is better with the mechanical treatment.
That would be my vote.
Yeah, so if we do end up doing surface landscape treatment, it would be in those larger green rectangles that are on the pool deck, or the podium deck, rather than, say, the perimeter around the edge of the building.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions from the board to the applicant?
I have one for the architect.
Okay.
So I just have a question about the lighting, since there's so much we're not allowed to comment on. So, on the larger drawings, the light, it's hard to tell from these, but they shine up and down. Is that correct?
They
Or just-
shine down only.
Oh,
And
okay.
just to clarify, we had one round of plans where we showed them shining up and down.
Mhm.
We liked the look of how that would light up the building a little more.
Yeah.
And then Jeff reminded us that that wasn't allowed. And so we revised the whole set. So we revised the lighting sheets and we
Okay.
revised all the renderings as well to be
Okay,
down lighting.
so you
only.
answered my question, because I think I would prefer them shining both ways, because the building is so monolithic that anything that we can do to give it
Yeah.
presence and a little
And-
bit
and-
of
and
an
we-
artistic lighting look would be great.
And we agree with you, and we do want to talk with Jeff about that further down the road. The details of if there might be any flexibility there in the language in the code, because it would be a really nice feature.
And aside from that, it's hard to tell, again, from the renderings, the scale of the light versus the scale of the building. I think they just need to be large enough. And then the color looks to be white on some of the plans, but yet the fixture lists, they're like the dark gray, like the window. Sorry, which are you proposing? I know it's a minor detail, but
I think, that the renderings are the more accurate.
okay.
Yeah.
I think I personally prefer them a little darker. They just
Punch a
jump
little
out as
more.
white, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to open the public hearing. I want to remind anyone speaking that you have 3 minutes. And we will be timing as we potentially have a number of folks speaking today.
All right, so to go over the instructions, to comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If you're commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And also, if you're in public, welcome to come up to the microphone And please limit your comments to elements under the purview of the design review board. As a reminder, this project will need to eventually go to the planning commission as well.
Hi, I'm Mark McAloon. I own Kane's Tire right next door to the future project here. So I'm skipping past the point of looking at the aesthetics of the thing being grossly disproportionate to the neighborhood. And as you can see from the shots going down E Street, blocking out Mount Tam, all that aside, because we're not supposed to talk about that, spent years trying to get a sign that was 20 feet high in the air, lit up with a light with the hillside people. I was denied because it's an eyesore. And in this case, you're going to have many, many lights 100 feet high in the air. The main thing is a mathematical problem. And Shaver Street is not wide enough. If you look at one of the pictures he had down Shaver Street, there's one car barely going down. If you have cars on both sides of the street, it's the most dangerous situation that you can have. I own Kane's. Our exit is straight across with 120 cars a day going out of Shaver Street, out that exit, turning left or right. It can barely make the turn with the cars parked on both sides. Cars cannot go up and down the street without hitting mirrors and knocking mirrors. I clean glass up every day from contact. They can't turn left across 4th Street, right? They've got 120 cars coming on me. If you take the 162 units and you do the average, the minimum is 2 cars per family, husband or wife. But if you get the low income people and you get a lot of people and no prejudice here, they're going to have 3-4 cars. They're going to be parked all over the neighborhoods. There's going to be no room for anybody. And that's the exit is there. So you got a one-way in for their downstairs unit, which by the way, is over 100 feet to the top of the building from that floor, from the main Shaver Street, and one way out. So you're going to have traffic trying to wait and get in and out of that area. We're going to have to try to get out of there. There's delivery trucks that are parked down Shaver Street. People come from all over Marin County to come to Kane's Tire. All the residents up on the hill come to Kane's Tire. And we have a massive amount of people going in and out weekly. It's over 1,000 cars will go in and out of that place every single week. So it's not wide enough with 2 cars parked on each side of the road on Shaver already. And the pictures that you had show it perfectly. The car's going down and there's no room on each side for another car to pass. So it doesn't work. The other thing is that I got to let you know is that that's used as a parking place. You can't do much about that, but there's no parking in the neighborhood. The residents have nowhere to park. The parking right now, there's 45 cars a day that park in that right now, and we're all poaching on that. I've rented 11 parking places that face Shaver Street for the last 25 years, 35 years. I've been there since 1975. The problem with it for the city of Santa Fe is I'm going to have to I own the building across the streets. I own United Liquors, West Coast Arts Foundation, recording studios, the Mount Town Theater Complex, and most importantly to the city, I own the city parking down there. I have had no choice but to take the city parking lot back for my tenants and for my parking, which will eliminate the West End parking lot, which is on a month-to-month with me right now. I'll have to pull the meters out and have to use it for my own parking. So I own this parking lot next to that, not enough for Kane's Tire. I own the city parking lot, not enough for the employees, not enough for my tenants on all those locations I told you about. So when I take that parking lot away, you're basically cutting the throats of the merchants. You're going to be street parking only. I don't know what you're going to do about Shaver. If you take any parking away from Shaver where it's unmetered, the local residents, I mean, we have to go around the block and through their neighborhood already because we can't turn left on 4th Street. It's just, you can't get out of there. I'll have 3 cars backed up. You have the people that use it as a regular road, a 2-way road, and it doesn't fit with a 2-way road right now. So if you make it a 1-way, it doesn't change anything. It's still going to have 400 cars parked around the neighborhood that this project will bring to Santa Fe. And it's already flooded. I'm sure the next people that talk are going to tell you because they live there. And we politely go around the block very slowly. It's a safety hazard, big time. We're always aware. We've never, thank you God, have had an accident, but I see accidents every day on that Shaver Street, mirrors clanking. And if you just spend one day driving up and down it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You cannot make it by with 2 cars without somebody pulling over and hugging the mirror of the car and possibly taking it off, which happens, or hitting the car that you pass. And it's, that's my whole thing is one of the things I want to get through is I don't want to take back that lot, but I need that lot. I've needed it for 10 years. I bought it 15 years ago with the foresight of this happening. Parking's everything in that end of the town, and the merchants are going to die when they find that out. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Hi, my name is Donnie Uzarski. I live on Shaver Street and my family's owned property at the Latham Shaver Corner for the last 50 years. I'm well aware of the realities of the infrastructure there and would like to go through a comparison for you that I investigated recently. On Shaver Street right now, which is a very narrow street, the San Rafael Parking Authority came through in 2020 when I asked them to please put T's and L's for parking because people park leaving too big of gaps, so it's inefficient. They said Shaver Street is absolutely not wide enough for T's and L's, can't have them. On Shaver Street, there are 3 businesses. There's Cane's that's got a very active driveway. There's AT&T, which has huge trucks, which actually stop the traffic on Shaver Street when they try and get into their gated parking lot. There are 15 dwellings. There are 15 homes on Shaver Street with 8 driveways. The street is so narrow that if a car is coming at you, you must pull over. There is no way 2 cars can continue moving at the same time and pass each other unless they're smart cars. I wanted to broaden out the infrastructure. I had asked for some diagrams. Did you get my things? Is there some way that those can get put up?
Absolutely.
So the 3rd Street and 2nd Street are main arteries. Shaver Street has the unique position where it has, can you go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Lanes converge at an angle. There's not 90 degrees. So
There you go. Switch back. In a second.
okay. So what I'm trying to say, and I'll speak it, is that coming down 3rd Street between E Street and Shaver is a downslope. And it's an angled road that actually is a 65-degree turn to go on to make a right turn onto Shaver Street. They've put bump outs now there. So to make that turn, you have to slow down to about 20 miles an hour. And that's in full speed traffic lanes. Okay, so right there, that's a 65-degree angle turn. This is full speed traffic right here. And to make that turn, now that there's bump outs, this is an old picture, but there's bump outs, very difficult to make this turn. This street, this is Shaver Street right here. It goes on up to the project, the proposed project right here. I wanted to point out that 3rd Street is a wide street. It has a middle line. It has T's and L's. You can see them here. It also has the advantage, if you follow Shaver Street and go down, right here is 3rd and Shaver. To cross the street here to get onto 2nd Street, if you're going into San Francisco, this small little block can hold 2.5 cars safely without the back end sticking out into oncoming traffic. But if you look at this block for 3rd Street, it's a nice long block. There's signals all along here, and there's no problem getting through this street. There's also 3 residences on E Street in comparison to 18 on Shaver Street. There are three driveways on 3rd Street, 2 go into parking lots and 1 goes into a residence. So we've got a huge discrepancy between flow and constriction. Shaver Street is not, it was never designed to be a main artery street, whereas 3rd Street has been developed already to be that nice broad smooth flowing road. I have spoken with structural engineers. It is possible to put driveways onto E Street. It might be a creative solution. You might have to come up with a creative solution, but it is completely possible to put driveways off of 3rd Street. And that would be my request this evening, is to consider asking that to change so that the businesses and the residents that live in the Shaver Latham neighborhood are not taking all the drainage of water and all the drainage of cars down a street that's too narrow. It's just not right.
Thank you.
Sorry, just a sec, Chair, just so you know, I'll put up my hand for 3 minutes if you like, or I can speak just so you know when that time
Okay,
hits.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, so please be cognizant of the 3-minute limit. Thank you.
My name is Will Beckman. I live on Latham Street and I've lived there for about 30 years. And yeah, other than the height disparity thing, which I honestly challenge anyone to point out another development in California that has a higher height disparity from 8 stories to 2 stories. It's really extreme. And I think that and the laws being what they are, that's what they are. But other than, unlike the development that's on Lincoln and Fifth, I feel like aesthetically the design of this building doesn't make any attempt to fit in with the existing neighborhood. It's been described as modern, which is kind of a catch-all term for sort of characterless, boxy buildings that are inexpensive to build. And I just don't think it fits in with the surrounding neighborhood. And in general, the design, I mean, there may be reasons for it, but it appears to be really just, I would call it architecturally tone deaf, frankly, in the way it's designed, especially as Donnie just pointed out, the ingress and egress onto Shaver Street is just, it's like no one ever went down Shaver Street before. It's such a tight street that, cars literally have to stop to pass each other. And I think, everyone covered that pretty well. I think one of the overlooked things too is that that is a real thoroughfare for children traveling from Sun Valley to Davidson on bikes. So there's a lot of travel during the school year of kids coming from Sun Valley. It's their only way to get through to Davidson via bike. And there's a lot of bike traffic on that road. And so adding hundreds of cars coming in and out of there in the morning while those kids are trying to get through to Davidson is another thing I think we should really consider. And one of the other things is, for a building that only has a residential neighborhood on one side, to put a rooftop plaza directly overlooking that side of the building when you have, you don't have residential in any other area, but you have a rooftop plaza where the residents of the neighborhood have to hear people, the roar of parties above them, seems to be not really taking into account the people in the existing neighborhood, in my opinion. And another thing is I also question the need for all that retail space in the building, considering that in 4th Street, there's a lot of empty stores right now. I mean, does it really need the retail, or would that be better served as converting that to housing as well? So let me just see if I hit everything here.
Can you make sure you're talking into the microphone too?
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that right. Yeah, to me, it would make a lot. I understand there's probably challenges with, making that driveway on E rather than Shaver. I mean, E is a broad street that has plenty of room. It seems like it's really well suited to have cars coming in and out of it, whereas Shaver seems almost impossible. And I would think it would be better served to have the bike area and the pedestrian area on that Shaver side. It just makes so much more sense in terms of the neighborhood. Rather than the cars coming in and out on Shaver, which is it's just not going to work. And anyone that's familiar with the traffic on Shaver can see that. That's going to be a major, major problem.
And we have hit the 3-minute marks. If you can wrap up, please.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also comment that I agree with these two people
Excuse
about.
me, I'm sorry, can you say your name?
Oh, my name's
when
Glenn
speaking?
Dizon.
Thank
I've
you.
lived in San Rafael since '79, and it's sad to see the changes that San Rafael has gone through. But I agree with everything about Shaver Street. It's a really dangerous street. Kane's Tire is a very important industry in our neighborhood. I've gone there since I lived in San Rafael, and there's so much traffic going in and out of Kane's Tires. I don't know if anybody, the architects, have ever driven down there, especially during the daytime. And I wanted to also say what the other gentleman said. Why can't we cut it down a story and use the bottom retail place for residents? As he said, there's so many empty buildings or empty offices, empty storefronts in San Rafael. We don't need any more retail space in San Rafael.
And I'd also like to know what the architect plans to do as far as maybe doing something on the roof where we have solar, so they can offset some of the ridiculous amount of electricity that building is going to be sucking up. Do you guys have any plans for solar to be added to this?
Wait, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually can't ask questions at this
Oh,
time,
I'm
but we're
sorry.
ready to
Okay.
hear your
I
comments.
just wanted to
So,
agree with the
thank you.
Shaver Street issue and the retail issue.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Lou Langley. I've lived on the neighborhood for over 75 years, seen a lot happen over those years. And what most people were saying is 100% correct. This is going to create a total nightmare in traffic. Right now, if you go down to any of the side streets, I bet you won't find any parking. I applaud people going to work on 4th Street, and obviously they have to park somewhere. It's usually on the side streets. So this will really make things more complicated. And the traffic, yeah, same thing. Latham's not much wider if it's wider, and you gotta stop, find a pull off somehow in order to pass. So yeah, if number one, if they can also alleviate, not alleviate, but create an ingress and egress on East Street, that would certainly help. But you're also at those 2 points on Shaver, you're eliminating some parking spaces, which is already too tight. Also, telephone company, AT&T, for years and years and years, they pumped water out of their basement, and they've redirected it somehow this year. I don't know how they're going to take care of that problem, because where AT&T is now used to be an apartment building. They used to have wells there. And so there's quite a high groundwater level in that area. So that might create another big problem. What are we going to do with all that water? Is it going to run down the gutters again like it used to? Well, at any rate, I see a lot of good in this project, and I see a lot of bad. Hopefully it can be worked out. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, I have a cold. My name is Vikram, and my partner and I are recent transplants to San Rafael. I'm a terrible public speaker, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly read what I wrote out, and there might be some duplicate findings, so I apologize. As one of the we live on 201 Shaver, which is literally at the corner of Shaver and Latham, so you couldn't find anybody else here other than Kane's Auto, who will be directly impacted by the scale of this project. As one of the closest neighbors of the proposed project, we are in a great position to offer firsthand insight to ensure this project successfully enhances the community without being a liability. Development is clearly needed in the area, and we welcome the addition of new neighbors and businesses. However, there are some aspects of this area that should be known and reviewed before plans are approved. We've talked about the building height, which we can't do anything about. We've talked about concerns about setback, which we can't do anything about. Everybody has talked about the parking entrance on Shaver, which I will reiterate. As we understand, the residential parking entrance is suggested to be on Shaver, which is narrow and often told to parked cars on both sides of the street near 4th due to Kane's tire shop location. Additionally, sidewalks have been extended at 3rd and 2nd Street, making for very narrow passage at these intersections. Also, the traffic lights at 3rd and 2nd are poorly timed, leading to frequent traffic backups on a daily basis. Upon simple inspection, it will be clear that this is not a street setup for the added traffic congestion. One suggestion, like everybody has mentioned, is that the parking entrance and exit should be on E Street of the proposed building. I also wanted to talk about permitted parking. The addition of these many housing units will add an increased demand for parking from tenants and guests. Permit parking is something that the city should seriously consider to introduce on our side streets. Street cleaning. Regardless of the actual parking entrance, a new building means more debris and litter in a small area. The street's existing sycamore trees already exacerbate drainage issues, most noticeable during times of rain. Street cleaning services should be added and supported by the building owner and the city to help alleviate the negative environmental impact of this project. As much as we support growth and development in our new neighborhood, it needs to be done thoughtfully and with the right intentions. We hope our suggestions are received with the good intention that it's meant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Noah Reichman, and I'm a resident here in San Rafael. I've been for 8 years, and I may have a little bit of different perspective, kind of a younger generation, but I think I'm looking forward to more of a vibrant downtown. And you'll see that in other cities in the area, such as Petaluma and Santa Rosa, which is embarking on a big high rise that they're building downtown as well. And part of that being vibrant is critical mass, and that's housing. And I think that housing is important. So I think this is designed for highest best use for this site. I can't think of anyone who wouldn't want to live at this project as design. And I think that parking, I've heard, has been one of the most frequent comments here tonight, but I think in general, lifestyles have changed and people are working remotely now more often. So you're not necessarily driving your car to work every day. You may not have more than one car or per family. So I'm curious to see what the parking study would say, but I think there are changes, and this is a very walkable development. So I think it's something to be great for the neighborhood and for the city of San Rafael. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at our Zoom now. Looks like we have 2 hands raised. So Nancy on Zoom, I'm clicking you to allow to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. So I am a West End resident of San Rafael, and I recently was aware of this project in the height. And from what was described, it seems that we cannot do anything about the height, which, as I believe Jeff earlier, one of the speakers mentioned how the disparity between 8 stories high to 2 are just out of content for the neighborhood. But my other question was, where does the line between the really high downtown San Rafael limits and the West End business height change? Sorry if I'm not explaining it right, because I just learned about this evening. But it's just the density that's being allowed. And I'm glad that also the other people spoke about the parking, because I was concerned about the parking. I didn't realize how bad it potentially will be. I am concerned about the West End businesses, because from my perspective, driving back and forth, through downtown and visiting places, the West End businesses are the most vibrant area. It's a little local neighborhood area, the businesses and the restaurants. And it sounds like this project's going to destroy their livelihood. And it's, in my view, totally disproportional for the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Let's see. I think we have one other hand. Dave Rhodes on Zoom. You are now able to speak.
Thanks a lot. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for your service on the board here. My name is Dave Rhodes. I live here in the West End, and I do live close to the site. I have a degree in architecture from UC Berkeley, and I've lived in Santa Fe for many years. And I drive, walk, and bike down the street all the time and through the neighborhood. And regarding specifically the mapping and design commentary that I believe you're seeking tonight, I do think that this is a really classy looking building, and I would love to see it as part of the community as presented today. And I do like how it uses natural looking building materials rather than being a big glass box that we see so many buildings built around the Bay Area today. So I think that's a big benefit to the community. And while this comment that coming may not be outside of your purview this evening, one suggestion for the project team and the city to consider is decreasing the parking requirements should the developer seek that, which could reduce car demand by simply not having space for cars, which reduces car demand. I want to repeat that because it's so important. If you don't have a place to park, people, it's not very convenient to drive. After all, this is a very walkable neighborhood and bikeable, as I do all the time. And more people are walking and biking, and 4th Street is, after all, a transit route. I've taken the bus through our neighborhood and to San Anselmo, to San Francisco. There's a Golden Gate Transit line that goes straight to San Francisco from this site. After all, there's even an e-bike store across East Street from the project. And I'd like to remind folks that like another speaker said, not everybody has 2 cars. In fact, we're a family that has 1 car and 1 e-bike, and I take my kid to daycare on the e-bike, and we also walk him to daycare. So we don't even use our car for most of our daily needs, which I could see a lot of folks in this type of development doing as well. I'd love to see this project help create a vibrant West End and greater downtown. And I encourage you to give the developer the relevant feedback for the design, especially around the aesthetics, and propose it and approve it for Planning Commission feedback. Thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, David. Okay. Next up on Zoom, we have Jeremy Nelson. Jeremy, you are now able to speak.
Great, thanks for taking my my comments. My name is Jeremy Nelson. I've lived here in San Rafael for 15 years. I'm excited to see this site develop. That site has been so poorly used in the past. Every time I drive by it with my children, I think of what else it could be and the housing that could go in there or the retail that could go in there. And so I'm very excited to see a project being developed. It's been a long-term goal of the city to connect a central downtown to the West End, and I think that's been very successful. And so I'm excited to see this missing link connecting those two being developed. I also think it's much needed housing, adds density where it's needed rather than contributing to more urban sprawl. So overall, I'm just excited to see the life and growth coming to San Rafael. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, I think we have one more speaker, Daniel Alm. You are now able to speak.
Okay, I'll text them in and we're figuring out what's done.
Daniel, if you could unmute yourself.
Am I there? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you. I'd like to stay in scope with, hopefully maybe I'd like things for the design review board to consider. The beige color, the mass of the building. I'd like to maybe ask the developers to come up with a proposal that's maybe a little bit darker to maybe bring down the mass of it. And I think it's not unreasonable for the design review board to ask the developer to seek other egress points for their parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, it looks like we have another hand raised on Zoom. Kenneth, you're now able to speak. If you could, yep. Kenneth?
Hi, good evening.
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. My name is Kenneth Hawk. I live on Bryn Mawr Drive and live less than 3 blocks from the site of this proposal. I am a 5th generation Santa Fe resident, homeowner, taxpayer, and someone who was born, raised, and works here in the city of Santa Fe. The proposed 7-story monstrosity of a building with 162 units is an appalling thought. The amount of added noise, traffic, and riffraff would be horrible. As someone who lived across the street from a 90-unit apartment complex in the Gerstle Park neighborhood for many years, the noise and activity was over the top. Loud cars zipping up and down the street, cars double parked, apartment residents monopolizing public parking and switching cars after 3 days to keep the spot, smoking and drinking on the public sidewalk, leaving garbage on the street, beer bottles, plastic wrappers, prostitutes, drug dealers, shady characters in and out, folks doing auto repair on the street, loitering, playing loud music, and the list goes on. All of these things that I listed occurred throughout the day, whether it was early morning or late night, and these things would happen in and around the vicinity of this complex if it were built. Also, depending on the cost of rent, especially if we're on the lower side, all these issues would be intensified. I realize these things don't want to be heard or talked about, but unfortunately, it's a reality. If you figure 2 people to a unit, that'd be well over 300 people on that single corner, and in many cases, you have 2 to 3 families in a single apartment, even if it's 1 or 2 bedroom. Not to mention the amount of cars, which then adds to local traffic and parking, which has been talked about. There are already so many apartments in the area, and most of which are only a couple or few stories high. A 7-story building would be a horrendous eyesore and will look completely out of place downtown, in this part of downtown. And this is not, San Francisco or Oakland. Moreover, the amount of added daily noise and traffic that would occur while this would be under construction for years would be awful. As someone who works 5 to 6 days a week, 50, 60 hours a week in order to pay for everything and live here and pay the exorbitant amount in property tax, I ask that this proposal be stopped. This is also coming from someone who cares about the future of Santa Fe, the aesthetics and characteristics of the neighborhood, and the safety of the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kenneth. Okay. I do not see any other hands on Zoom. One more chance if anybody in City Hall would like to come up. We generally, that's up to the chair.
Yeah, let's keep it to the 3 minutes.
He already spoke, just to be clear, but yeah. Okay,
An
just one.
additional 3 minutes.
Okay.
I did just want to mention that I don't know who currently owns the site, but my wife and I went around and picked up 2 huge trash bags of trash that were, the whole area was just trash. Like no one was cleaning it up or doing anything. We picked up 2 big trash bags of trash to clean up the area. So I don't know, like if the people that are going to develop this currently own the site, but to me, it wasn't a good indication of being a good neighbor that there was so much trash on the site as is. So I would just say that.
Thank you.
So
Okay. Within the 3 minutes, please.
So some of the things that you may not know about this site is AT&T is right next door, and they have a lot of equipment on the roof, and the roof has been deemed, the way AT&T put it to me is, don't mess with us. We're
Oh,
not
sorry,
changing
can you address the chair when you speak?
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. AT&T, when I spoke to them, said, don't even think of us changing any of our equipment on the roof. We don't care how noisy it is. It is noisy. And if somebody decides to build into that space, that will be something that they will have to be aware of. And we're not changing a thing. That was one thing. And the other thing that I wanted to point out about the E Street is E Street has a 3rd lane that allows a right-hand turn. So traffic can get out of the full speed traffic so that they're not slowing down the main artery of 3rd Street coming in. That was it.
Thank you.
Really don't want to do a public speaking thing, but I've lived on Latham.
Can you please state your name? Sorry, before
My
you
name is
comment.
Armida. I've lived on Latham for 32 years. I am now a business owner in San Rafael for the 2nd time. I am so concerned for the traffic coming out onto Shaver. He stated it extremely well, but it can't be stated enough. You guys need to actually come see what that's like. And the way they changed them up out there, you can't fit 2 cars in there in between Second and First. But let's get to Latham Street and Shaver. They won't put parking stalls, spaces. The city refuses. I've asked, she's asked, they won't do it. And yet you're going to somehow allow that many cars to come in and out of it. Seems a discrepancy that is unfair. And how can that legally be allowed? It's a question I think you guys need to answer to us who have to live there. If we are not allowed to put parking places so that we know where cars are parking, and yet you're going to add more traffic going back and forth on there, explain to me why that is so, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mario Ponticelli. I've been in the neighborhood for over 60 years. It's a huge mistake to have traffic coming out on Shaver Street. It's not wide enough. And I would have been more eager to speak tonight, but San Rafael's getting to be a real drag. I stay out of San Rafael. I work in the East Bay. I take more time over there. And I especially stay out of San Rafael on Friday night and Saturday night. I think you know why. All the traffic in that neighborhood with that dining under the lights. So don't mess up Shaver Street more than it already is. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Irene Langlamay. I also live on Latham Street and have so for 51 years. I have noticed a great change in this city, which is very sad. And I am sorry to you folks that the New World Order is shoving their regulations down your throat for the rest of us to not enjoy. I do walk San Rafael quite a bit, and I can tell you that San Rafael is not that safe to walk in. There have been multiple times when I have had to run to get out of the way of a vehicle when they are making turns because they don't see the pedestrians. So I ended up starting to wear a green shirt and putting a green cover on my dog so they would see us. But I do not agree with this project being where it is. It's a nice building, yes, but it should go somewhere else because, as other speakers have said, it's going to kill the businesses on 4th Street and West End. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other people in City Hall, and I do not see any other hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing. Now I'm going to ask the board members to talk about their comments. Any volunteers to start? Jeff?
So certainly the state density bonuses are beyond frustrating, but that's all I'm going to say about that. Looking at the building itself, I think it's a reasonably handsome building. I think with the changes of colors and the recessed areas, I think it's a real good technique for breaking up the masses on a fairly large and fairly horizontal building. I think that the tan areas add some nice vertical elements to the building. I think the building for the most part is nicely detailed. My comments would be, again, earlier, the amenities on the site are critical. I think, one of those club rooms could be a workout room. I think as many activities as you can have on site that would keep the residents on site is a good idea. I'm looking at the pool plaza area. I thought there wasn't enough green there to begin with. I think this is an urban project, but I think you have a chance to create maybe a little bit of a green oasis there, which hasn't happened. And I was a little disappointed to find out that some of the planters are actually bioretention. I think when you present your drawings, I think you should make that more clear. And I think the audience has brought up some good points. One being the retail. Is the retail really necessary? I mean, I'm sure you've done your studies and you think you can fill those spaces, but would those spaces be better served by residential? I think that's a good question to ask. I think the location of the rooftop plaza should be questioned some. I think the impact on the neighbors may be a little bit onerous. But the really big question is, and I can see where you put your entrances. I mean, the topo on the site sort of logically places them where you have them, but it just looks like Shaver Street is just a deal breaker as far as putting that much traffic on. Those are my comments.
I don't know if you guys come to these meetings just for fun or so, but if you have, I've been complaining against these big buildings and non-parking projects for the last 8 years now. Hasn't done me much good, to be honest with you. Now the state's against me, so I don't have very few tools left. You know, I think cities should be shaped like pyramids, where there's a center core and that's where the tall buildings occur. And as you step out into neighborhoods, the edges terrace down. So when those buildings hit those residential areas, it's a comparable scale. I could see this coming a long time ago. Now we got this 10-story building up against these two-story homes. I think it's dreadful. I really do. I want to commend the architect, though, on at least parking this project the way they have, because it's one of the few projects we've had come through here where we've had adequate parking. Going back to the building, there's nothing I can say about height except that it's too tall by 2 stories at least. I don't think it's that well designed, to be honest. I see these 4 big cubes. I like the offsets. I mean, that's good. I think you've done a good job there, but I see these 4 big cubes kind of sticking out at me. It'd be nice, maybe these center 2 cubes to have more articulation or maybe a little more ins and outs. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys. But I mean, when I saw those elevations, the perspectives, it just seems like those are 4 big masses up there. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that, but that's what really comes to my mind. You know, I thought about stepping it down where it hits the neighborhoods, but I don't think you can do that either. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't know. This is if this is the new age, maybe well, hold on to your hats.
Okay. Michael, and just again, we're being asked to comment on the massing and facade articulation. Although we heard a lot of other important, pieces of information, those aren't for our comment today.
Including the entrance.
Yeah, we can talk about the entrance. Yeah.
I do want to clarify, and I don't see the entrance as being in the purview of the DRB. If you were to try to condition the project to relocate the entrance, that really needs to be coming from the Public Works Department's analysis of actual traffic impacts. We can't just say we want to move the entrance just because. As we've described previously, any of your input really needs to be related to objective development standards that we've adopted. And so as part of that process, Public Works is reviewing the traffic. And so that will come to bear and that will come before Planning Commission. And similar comments, like even just, the 4 big cubes and having an issue with that. The problem there is it has to be related to a specific objective development standard that the city has adopted. And so if we can't point to an actual development standard that says you need to articulate the building in a very specific manner, then that's what we need to rely on. And so that's why in the staff report, we have very specific things that's in the specific plan that we can rely on, if that makes sense.
Could I add one more thing? I wanted to ask, and I forgot to ask, has Public Works looked at this project?
Yes,
The
they have.
traffic?
Yeah, no, they've definitely looked at the project as a whole. In terms of the traffic, they are still reviewing that as we speak. Yeah.
Anything else, Don? Okay, Michael?
Well, it's hard to take a building of this scale, I think, and fit it into the neighborhood when it clearly doesn't. And that's not something that we can comment on. So I think it's a handsome building. I do think that the colors seem to fit into the environment fairly well. I like the accent of the darker windows. I think that will give it some presence. I do agree with what's been said that it just does feel monolithic. And I do think it looks almost like four buildings that are pretty big because of the recess. I just wonder if there's a way architecturally without reducing capacity to articulate the surface a little more so that it gives the impression that it's not so heavy. And I do like the top of the building a lot. That seems to be, a pretty common architectural element now, with the overhang roof. But it's more the mass of the facade that feels a little heavy. And I don't have a solution that's coming to me. right
Yeah,
away,
not
but-
to interrupt, but I was thinking about what Don said and what you said on the 4 blocks. And I think relating that to the corner elements,
Mhm.
that the corner element is not necessarily distinct from the other portions of the building as it's currently designed. And maybe that there is I'm thinking that it may be because it's the same color as the adjacent blocks. And if an additional color maybe between the light and the dark, which is pretty high contrast, could be added to accentuate that corner stucco block, there may be an actual corner, and we wouldn't be talking about just 4 unified blocks. So that's how I was relating the comments that you guys were
Right.
both saying.
Let me make one more.
Yeah.
Just another thought, I think the upper level outdoor patio areas are really important for the residents. I can imagine if I lived nearby, there would be a worry about noise or parties. I wonder if there's a design way to sort of screen in the noise a little bit. I don't know if it's through glass or some other kind of panels that don't cut down on the open space feeling, but maybe there's a way to mitigate that somewhat from a design standpoint.
Okay, I'm going to layer in my comments and then we can look for unifying themes. I'm just going to focus them just so I'm organized around the 4 kind of review criteria areas. I think on windows and openings, I don't really have a lot of comments. I think those are articulated nicely. I think the way the architect responded to the trim and the aluminum made sense, and I think contributes to the unification of a large building with a number of different window types. So I appreciate that piece. The massing and composition, this is one where I feel like we have talked about the limits of our comments, that there aren't a lot of comments to be made. I think that for me, those garage entries architecturally lose the pedestrian scale on the entry level. So the way that they're articulated, in the next phase is critical. And then the tripartite facade articulation, I think the way the diagrams broke it down made it pretty clear to see that that was being met on the bottom, the middle, and the top. So I'll focus my kind of critical comments around the corner element like we've talked about. I have a hard time when I look at the building, seeing that the corner is well articulated. And I think not trying to, or in order to address that without changing the building mass, the idea of color came up, or material change, or something that gives it some presence on the corners. And I actually don't think that all corners are created equal. You kind of have the main corners and then kind of the back corners. So maybe not all of the corners have to be a different color, but you could consider a color and material change on those 2. I'm thinking of the ones on 4th Street that kind of flank the main building entry and that civic space to kind of give it a little more hierarchy overall and, get away from that monolithic tone. So those are my thoughts. Is there any more comments? Okay.
I'm not sure how much this is in our purview, but I actually think, retail and restaurant space is really important to a thriving downtown. And if this is considered part of the downtown area, I personally am in favor of seeing because it brings public space, you know, into the building. So I don't know what the right amount is, but I like that.
Yeah, I don't know if we can comment on the programmed retail space. One thing that came to mind is that these needs, you know, like we're seeing on 4th Street, evolve over time. So it's retail now. Is there anything that prohibits it from being, you know, changed to a different use later? Or is that something that we can recommend be considered as the project moves forward?
If they wanted at some point in the future to change it from retail to residential,
Mhm.
I think at that point, we would have to look at exactly what the changes are. If those involve changes to the exterior, that would likely require some level of design review. And then just another look at, because this required a whole level of sort of density bonus analysis. And so that would have us kind of go back to the drawing board and have to look at that all over again, as well as impacts to parking and those sorts of things.
So
So
probably no.
yeah, it's possible. It's just a matter of, you know, the process.
There's one other thing I wanted to add, and it's just cautionary. I don't know how thick this stucco is, but that creeping fig, Ficus pumila, will rip this right off the walls. I've made that mistake before, so something just to consider.
Good detail. I don't know if I could summarize the comments. Jeff, do you want to try to? There was not a lot of consistency. I can go through the ones that I kind of wrote down. Consider additional greening of the plaza.
Can I just want to make sure that because we are looking for compliance with objective standards.
I'm sorry, Community Development Director.
Yeah, sorry, Ally Judas, the Community Development Director. So the responses, the comments really should be tied to any specific item that Jeff has outlined in the staff report. And so if the response is it's not compliant, then the reason has to be pretty objective. It has to be pretty direct, like something that the applicant can actually look at and go, okay, we understand what you're saying. So if you're saying color is the thing that can address your concern with that corner,
Mhm.
it should be like, what are you asking for? Like color along the entire corner, like, you know, pretty specific
Oh,
items.
specifically. Okay, in the
Does
4
that-
buckets only?
I'm sorry?
In the 4, like the table 4 corner elements, windows and openings.
Right, right, because I think what Jeff, you've outlined which items are in compliance, and it sounds like all of the items are in compliance in terms of the development standards. And there were some items in the second table that you may have been asking for some
Correct. Yeah, and that's
confirmation.
correct. Yeah, that's table 4 that Chair Reggie's referring to. Right.
So not summarize any of the comments outside of that. I'll clarify my comment on the corner. Can I see that board? Yeah, it's just making sure this is the right elevation. This is the main entry. So a different color from here, but the inverse corner, like this volume from there to there, and this volume from there to the same corner, to define this corner and this corner versus the, you know, now all of these are defined in the same color. Color or material, I guess I'll say. Thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I would also say maybe since the center of this has the gallery area and sort of what you're considering the public access space, and maybe some way to make that feel like it's coming forward.
Which one does that
Through
relate
color.
to
So
here?
it's really about the articulation and mass.
So that's massing and composition.
So again, thinking of how to give it more dimension.
So if you're adding the color at the corners, then in order to be orderly, you may want to consider adding it at the center as well, the center bay.
So having the 2 corners be the same color as the center bay, is that what I'm sorry, is that?
Consider that, yeah.
Okay,
The corners being a different color than the other bays addresses the corner elements one.
right.
And then the massing and composition may suggest that if you do that, you want to change the color of the center bay
Hmm.
as well. then you're alternating.
Okay.
So in light of what we're providing comments on and what we're not, Jeff, do you want to summarize, just so we're staying in bounds?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, to be clear, the one area that I think relates to objective standards is what we've just been talking about in terms of the corner element. So making that color distinct, I guess, from the other corners. I guess I'm a little confused why, now that we're changing also the middle color to those same colors, I think we're getting away from making that corner distinct again. But that was the main area that I heard that was at least touching upon these comments. I think we can certainly ask the applicant, for things like the rooftop deck, if they can add more landscaping. And what else? I think those were the main things. Please, anybody jump in if I missed anything.
I had mentioned maybe if it's possible to add screening or something that might soundproof a little bit.
Right, and we could certainly ask them. It's just a matter of requiring that without an actual standard, right? Right.
It might be just the height of if there's glass around it or something, be increased. I don't know, 48 inches versus 42 or something.
Okay.
Do you want to
Any-
summarize before we make a motion, or is the summary the corners only?
Yeah, so yeah, to summarize, changing the color and or material for the two corners along the 4th Street facade, as well as the main column in the center of the building on the 4th Street facade to whatever that new color and or material is for those corners.
I would probably change as well as to maybe and or.
And or, yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a look at options.
Okay.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion?
And sorry, one other thing is in our rules of order, which is the next item on this agenda, there's a practice that we haven't been doing that we need to start doing, which is allowing the applicant to basically provide feedback on any input received before we actually make a motion.
Okay, then it seems like we're at the time to do that now.
Right.
Would the applicant like to address the items discussed?
I will be very brief. Riley Hurd again. The way that we've been approaching this kind of new standard is it is good to hear the things that might not be precisely objective. We're writing them down. We're considering them. We're looking at them. You get 4 additional eyes on the project with lots of experience. Just wanted to let you know that we are listening to those, and we'll explore and implement whatever is possible. And then, of course, the one that is directly related to an objective standard will be addressed. Other than that, thank you very much.
Okay, and now do we take it back to further discussion? Is there any discussion, additional discussion by the board? Is anyone ready to make a motion?
What we just did.
I'm not sure how to word it.
I think the motion is something like we motion to approve the project as presented with the requirement to address the corners, the corner elements as discussed at the meeting.
So we're at the point where now the corner elements is the only thing we're really making a motion on, correct?
I believe so.
And that's something we could bring back on consent probably, because it seems pretty minor.
Yeah, I guess that's a question if yeah.
So
if you made a motion to approve with the conditions that you specified, you could rely on staff to confirm those changes have been made, and you would recommend approval to the planning commission.
That's what I was
with those
attempting to do.
conditions.
Not very well, though, apparently.
And everything else that we've done tonight are recommendations that the applicant, it's up to it's their prerogative whether or not they want to do it, correct?
Correct.
Including like soundproofing on the outdoor rooftop plaza.
Correct.
Okay, do I need to say that again?
I
Okay,
I
no,
think
we
you
need- we need a second.
As you said it.
Okay,
so.
you have to say your name.
Michael Lexon.
Okay. I think we're ready to take a vote.
So sorry, who moved and who seconded?
I did the motion.
Okay. And
Reggie.
got it.
Yeah, I think I forgot my name.
Okay. Member Alexin,
Aye.
member Kent,
Aye.
Chair Reggie,
Aye.
and member Blaney.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Motion passes. So we're now going to move to the next item on the agenda, the report to Design Review Board.
Yeah, I know it's getting late. I don't want to make this too long. So every year, we're supposed to do a report to the Design Review Board. And so this is what that is, to make a change. Sorry, is there a question? Okay. All right, so yeah, agenda item 4, report to Design Review Board. So this is essentially for selecting a new chair for this year. Typically, it goes on a rotating schedule, so Kowalski would be the next upcoming for the chair, if you guys want to continue that past practice. And member Kent would then become the vice chair. And then in terms of the rules of order, the staff report describes how the city council last fall basically made some changes. And really what it was a lot of the Design Review Board sort of procedures and policies were in a certain section of the zoning ordinance, and they just pulled them into a different chapter just to make it similar to how other boards and commissions are done. And so it was mainly just cleanup items. They didn't really change anything substantive in terms of how you guys do your business, but I just wanted to have that reflected. The one thing I wanted to highlight was the follow-up discussion piece. That's a practice we should start incorporating more, is allowing the applicant to just provide any feedback before any motions made.
Can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
So I guess I'm just wondering where the line is that triggers the public comment again, because that has happened before. So if we ask the applicant to come up and address any comments and we receive those comments, is that like, is there any way that can trigger the public comment?
So if I can give some context, we actually started that practice, I want to say about 5 years ago, when applicants were like leaving and feeling like, I'm not really sure if we addressed your comments, and then coming back and, what a board member may have said, that actually wasn't what I meant. And so we started that practice to like allow the applicant to get clarity and make sure they understood what that was about. And that's really the intent. It's not an intent to allow them to kind of, sway you or like do anything like try to, state their case, but really to make sure that they understand what the board is asking of them.
So it's for clarity. Yeah.
It's primarily for clarity, right?
But
Okay.
that wouldn't trigger the public. Yeah.
Right, it would not.
That would trigger the public.
It would not trigger a public comment.
No, but what would is if you allow a person to speak again, theoretically, if I'm not mistaken, everyone who spoke could have come back up.
Yes.
So I know what you wanted to do, but it's pretty risky.
Yes, and yeah, and that is something that, we will be more aware next time that, if somebody's wanting to speak again, this one in particular spoke quite a lengthy.
It could get into a
quite lengthy
debate
one.
back and forth very quickly.
Yeah, and
It's
somebody
not-
may say, I feel like I should get an opportunity as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, thanks.
Okay.
And so I think those were the main things to go over. Yeah, I don't have anything else to go over in that. Are there any other questions?
Anyone have questions for Jeff? No,
Just, does it have to pertain to exactly this, or can it be related to?
it's on the report to the design review board agenda item.
Do you have a related question, Member Alexin?
Well, two questions. One is, so the rotating chairs, so you have Kowalski on 2023, we're well into 2023. So how does the timing work again?
Yeah, so the reason is because we just haven't had any other meetings this year.
Oh,
So it's the first meeting of the year. Yeah.
okay.
Not trying to land grab.
And then maybe I'll ask you another one then after the meeting, just about public comment when it's off topic to the design review board. Unless you want to address it now. but-
Yeah, or I think actually that's a good one for towards the end for communications to direct me to come back to the next meeting with responding to any questions.
Do we have any other questions for staff? Then we need,
Was there anything in the last project? Was there anything that we could, what's the word for it? Not legally, but have them change or do? We didn't cite one code or issue that they didn't already do.
So I think for
We
something like
we
that,
asked them to change some colors, we asked them to change some elements of the block building, ask them for soundproofing, but theoretically, they could take that plan tomorrow in front of the planning commission and not do a thing that we asked.
right. So I think first, right now, we're still on agenda item 4 regarding the rules of order. I guess if that's related to rules of order, but I was thinking more towards the end of the meeting is when DRB members can come to me with questions, and so that to come back to you with an
Well,
answer.
I
But
I
yeah.
think I answered my own question.
Yeah.
okay, should we open the public hearing? Remind anybody that you have 3 minutes to speak and we'll be timing you.
Sure. So to comment on Zoom, use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, press *9 and then press *6 to unmute yourself. And seeing no hands raised on Zoom for this item.
Okay, then we're going to close the public hearing. Does anyone on the board have any more comments? Okay, so can I get a motion? Is anyone ready to make a motion?
I move we continue to adopt the rotation set forth by staff.
Sarah Reggie, I second it.
Oh, and that was Member Kent that did that, I guess.
Okay. Roll call. Member Alexin?
Aye.
Member Kent?
Aye.
Chair Reggie?
Aye.
And Member Blaney?
Aye.
Okay.
Approved.
You did a very good job as chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So next we'll move to the director's report.
Yeah, just a couple of things. The general plan annual progress report that gives sort of a summary of how the city's done in meeting housing goals and complying with achieving general plan policies. Went to the Planning Commission recently, and it will be going to the City Council, I believe this month, March 20th. And so that's a state mandated thing that the city has to do. The second piece is that City Council recently adopted a policy of no camping allowed at Albert Park. And as part of that, they'll be looking to provide different housing services to those individuals who are camping there. And then finally, there's a vegetation management program underway in terms of fire safety and removing vegetation that is can cause fires. And so that's another program that is underway. The city council adopted their last meeting.
Great, thank you. Are there any board communications to staff at this time? So I think this is where we talked about if there's questions for Jeff that he can research and bring back. Now's the time.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on the how we do the chair and vice chair. Just one quick question on that. So since Sharon isn't here right now, what if she doesn't want to be chair? I mean, is there a process for?
Yeah, I think at the next meeting, if she could communicate that, but I have spoken to her and I think she's comfortable with it.
Okay, good.
So I can-
That makes me feel better. Okay, so then my other question was, I'm still learning the process and when we can comment or when we can ask questions, and I still have some work to do on that. But what do we do in terms of helping when the comments are off topic? It was the majority of the meeting tonight where they were commenting on things that we're passionate about and things that we probably would, a lot of us might agree, but they weren't part of the design review board's purview, but yet it took a lot of time. So what's the process for?
Yeah, no, I think
like
that's a yeah.
Maybe if that's the answer, then I accept that. I'm just surprised.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think understanding this is an agenda item, so not to go too in depth on it, but part of that's on staff to do a better job in the beginning to really say, understand traffic is going to be front and center and parking. However, these are not items that are within the DR Design Review Board's purview. These can be handled the Planning Commission at a later date. And then also after public comment period is over, absolutely the chair or DRB members can ask staff, say, we've heard these comments, can staff provide input on whether or not this is in our purview? Yeah.
Anything else to staff at this time? Okay, then with that, meeting adjourned.